Hi guys, my name is Dante West, Head Chef Coordinator of West Development Group's Academic Culinary Arts Academy. In my job title, I write all the curriculums and all the schedules for you guys that you've been seeing over the last 6 weeks. This week coming up, we're going to be talking about and doing a recap of all things that you've seen happen. We're going to talk about safety and sanitation. We're going to talk about how to make that emulsion again. We're going to go over the baking skills, talk about the different doughs and techniques that you have learned over these last 6 weeks and try to take them to another level. So when you go home, you can show all these new things that you've learned to your families and to your friends. So without further ado, I'm going to move forward. We're going to go right into this next section talking about safety, sanitation, and personal hygiene. All right? Tools, safety, and hygiene. In this segment, we're going to be talking about those three things. We're going to elaborate a little more on what you saw on week 1 of your academic culinary arts program. This week we're going to be talking about hand washing and sanitation and how to properly do so. Remember, the first thing that you're going to do is grab that soap and make sure that that water is turned on to at least 110 to 120 degrees. If you can't get it up to 120, that's okay because that's what the soap is for. You're going to lather your hands with that soap, making sure that you're washing in between your fingers all the way up to your elbows, all the way around on both hands, making sure that you get plenty of lather and plenty of soap on your hands. Once you do that, you rinse them off with that warm water. Like I said, 100 to 110 degrees. If you could get it or stand hotter, that's good. But if you can't, at least make sure it's warm water and not cold water, just to help get rid of some of those germs that you're going to find on your arms or in your hands during your day-to-day activities. But make sure you rinse all that soap off, get your paper towel, dry your hands off thoroughly, and then you're ready to go to the next section, which we're going to talk about now. Our tools and some of the items that we use in our program over the last 6 weeks. The first tool I'm going to talk to you about is the chef knife. Remember, the chef knife is that versatile tool that we like to use, that you can use for any type of cutting, whether it's meats, whether it's vegetables, if you want to cut some potatoes because you want to do a mashed potato, or if you just want to do some of those nice tricks of the trades that we learned in class. This is a good tool for you to use. So a chef knife. Now you'll see them in different arrays of different sizes, but this is the one that you're going to see most chefs have, hence the name chef knife. Remember the proper cutting technique, using that claw motion and slicing, using your fingers as a guide when you're cutting those different items to make sure that you're cutting properly and that you don't accidentally cut yourself. Because that's one thing you want to try to avoid in any kitchen that you're in or using any type of knife. The next items that we talked about during week 1 were measuring utensils. You have your measuring cups that usually vary from a 1 ounce to all the way down to a ½ ounce, sometimes even a 4 or 8 ounce cups you can find. Usually you can find a description of those right here on the side, and that'll let you know exactly what measurement you have and how much you're going to use. Then you have the measuring spoons. These, I know some of you guys used them a lot, but there was a few issues that we had, but guess what? We made it through because you guys learned how to use these tools to measure out the different powders, the different ingredients that you needed to make your cookies and your doughs that we're going to talk about down the line there. And of course, no chef can walk into a kitchen unless they have one of these. It's a thermometer. This thermometer measures the temperature of different foods, regardless of whether it's cold or whether it's hot. It measures in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So depending on if you're here, say if you just happen to take a trip over to France, you can still use this tool, and it's universal all the way around the world. This is going to help you to keep your food out of the temperature danger zone. That danger zone that we talked about where bacteria can grow and other items that you don't want in your body can actually start to live. So this is something that you want to see, if not on your chef, somewhere in the kitchen that is accessible for you to use or for someone else to use who's cooking your food. And then also, you can't go without having your cutting board. A cutting board is a necessary item, either when you're cutting, sometimes when you're measuring, or just to have something to do the work on, to collect your mise en place on top of your cutting board. Okay? So also we're going to talk about what we're going to do next week, or what we're going to talk about in our next session. In that next session, we're talking about garde manger. That's when we made all of our emulsions. We talked about our salads. We actually did a lot of different things during that week. So I want you guys to get ready and be prepared for what's coming up. And remember what your chef instructors taught you so we can have that discussion in class. Okay? I hope to see you again on this next one. Remember week 2 Remember when we talked about salads, we talked about emulsions of dressings? Does anybody remember what that was or what section that was? If you said garde manger, you're 100% correct. Garde manger is that area where all the cold prep items are prepared. All your salads, whether it's with lettuce or whether it's without lettuce, antipasta salad, and some hors d'oeuvres that are prepared cold are also served and put together in that garde manger section. And if you remember that, you guys are really paying attention. And I know your chef instructor was doing a wonderful job explaining these things to you. But now we're going to kind of dig deeper into that and talk a little more about what happened during that week or during week 2. So we talked about emulsions. We know we talked about the different styles of dressings, the styles of an oil and vinegar dressing, being able to merge those together to create a fresh and vibrant flavor using aromatics like herbs, some garlic, sometimes a little bit of light seasoning. It's kind of similar to like an Italian dressing. And this is the type of dressing that we have here. This is an oil and vinegar emulsion or an oil and vinegar dressing. Something that sometimes you would like to eat or like to use on your salads, or even if you're doing a pasta salad, you can pour this on there and get a nice season and a nice flavor on that. So remember that, an oil and vinegar dressing or vinaigrette is what you're going to be looking for or going to be talking about when you think about garde manger. We also have a different style of dressing, and that is a cream-based dressing. Usually and traditionally, it has an egg or an egg yolk-based dressing, what they start for. Then they add in the different oils and different seasonings and flavors that they want to add. This one in particular is a blue cheese dressing. So using that same concept and those same flavors, blending those things together and then making this cream-based dressing with a little bit of buttermilk and some blue cheese really gives it a lot of flavor, gives it that hearty body. And I know a lot of you guys like to eat something like this with your pizza or even sometimes with your chicken wings. But normally this would go on top of your salad, and you can use it as a dip in a crudité, which is a vegetable tray that also comes out of your garde manger section. So remember these things and these key notes that we talked about in garde manger, and just keep in mind that you yourself can make anything you want and create any style of salad, whether it's with lettuce or without lettuce, as we move along. And I want to thank you for this time, and just remember on this next section that we're going into, talking about doughs, talking about techniques from doughs and all the baking, we had a lot of fun with that. And I want to see what you guys remember on this next session. Hey guys, in week 3 we talked about the introduction to biscuits and making different doughs and batters. Remember the difference between a dough and a batter. A batter was wet, had a wet consistency, and when you mixed it, you can mix it in a bowl and pour it into whatever mold that you wanted to make it shape into. And then remember with that batter was something that you had to kind of knead, or you had to kind of work with your hands. Even using a cutting board, you can make that dough and form that, but with your hands or sometimes in a mixer if you have something like that at home. And remember with a dough, you usually get a consistency of like a bread or something like that. And with the batter, you would get a consistency of like a cookie, or if you were making even something like let's say a muffin, or if you're making even cornbread. And so remember those differences there, because one was wet and one was a little more dry than the other. So keep that in mind when we talk about this during the next week, and we recap on some of the things that we discussed before. Now going into this next week, we're going to be talking about different snacks. We're going to be talking about appetizers, and we're going to kind of bring that introduction back. And I know you guys remember some of the fun that we had doing those things. So I will see you when we get back. But remember, baking. Hey guys, how you doing? Hey, I guess we're back. So we're going to talk about week 4, where we did snacks, appetizers, and hors d'oeuvres. Now remember at the beginning of that week when we talked about hors d'oeuvres and talked about snacks and appetizers, we discussed what the differences were. But what I'm going to jog your memory about is what an hors d'oeuvre or an appetizer actually was used for traditionally. So remember back in the days, back in olden times, as some people like to say, an appetizer wasn't something that you just and only ate at the beginning of your meal. It was actually something that you had a chance to eat throughout the courses of your meal. So remember, you had a beginning course, then you had the course in between, and you had several different courses moving along. So say if you had like a 4 or a 5 course meal that you had prepared for you, you would have your appetizer in between those courses. And that would be something that you would eat to kind of cleanse your palate and prepare you for your next item that was brought to the table for you to enjoy. So remember we had that discussion, or remember your chef instructor dived a little deeper into that when we talked about it on maybe Monday's class or possibly even Tuesday's class and moving forward. Keep that in mind when you think about appetizers. Keep that in mind when you think about hors d'oeuvres and how they're served to you and the way we eat them now traditionally versus the way they were enjoyed before. So remember, traditional French cooking and cuisines before our current cuisines and cooking that we have now, it was actually classical eating. People enjoyed their food. They took their time. They actually let their palates be cleansed and let their palates enjoy the different flavors that are created. Now in the hustle and bustle of today's society and world, we like to move fast. We want to eat quick. We want to just grab those meals and just eat and pretty much to scarf them down without enjoying the quality of those things. So remember, when your chef instructor was going over this during week 4, we talked about those levels of an appetizer, of an hors d'oeuvre, and what that really meant to enjoying a meal. So keep that in mind as we go into our next session in section 5, talking about breakfast items, where breakfast started from, and we might even talk about a little bit of entrees to sneak in there as well. I know we had some fun during those weeks. So you guys remember that? All right. So we'll see you in a little bit, guys. Have a good one. Hey guys, now we're talking about week 5, breakfast preparation. They like to say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And I'm going to discuss with you why they consider it the most important meal of the day. See, let's start with the etymology of the word breakfast. Literally, break fast. Breaking your fast from that night before. Going to sleep with barely anything in your stomach and then waking up and only eating after a certain time in the morning. That's where it originated from. It was breaking your fast from not eating overnight. See, we took breakfast to a whole new level. We took it from just getting up generally in the morning, getting you something quick to eat, and going on about your day, whether it was out in the field with your family or it was something you were doing around the house. And we took that and we turned it into what you see now in America, where we eat so many different things for breakfast. And we consider breakfast to be so vast. When we like to have eggs sunny side up, over easy, scrambled. We like to have omelets with so many different things in there. Whoever had a Midwest omelet, there's so many different items inside that omelet that it's actually a meal by itself. But we like to put potatoes with it and then the bread with it. Then you might get a piece of bacon and sausage to go with it to make that one simple meal something so big and so grand. See, that's breakfast to us. Now, I'm not saying whether that's good. I'm not saying whether that's bad, but if you look around in society today, you'll realize that certain things for breakfast maybe we shouldn't eat so much of, or maybe eating something in moderation would be a little better off for you. So just remember one key thing as we talked about in breakfast, not only the different styles of breakfast, where it came from, the history of breakfast, that etymology of that word, break fast, but also think about what you're eating and what you're putting into your body and how you can take these activities home and not only teach your brother, your sister, but maybe your parents, and to kind of give them a little knowledge about some of the things that you've learned here in your academic culinary arts academy with your chef instructor. So now we're going to start to move on, and we're going to go on to session 6. Yes. Session 6, where we talked about biscuits, we talked about baking, we talked about desserts, we talked about pastries. We really brought it home with that sweets, with those confectioners. And I know you guys remember a lot of those things that you made during that week, because we had a great time. I know in the class that I was in, we had an excellent time. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk about week 6 or session 6 and talk about baking and desserts. All right, guys, so now we're in week 6. We're talking about pastries and desserts. We're going to talk about the difference between a pastry and a dessert and how that applies to you and what we talked about in this week's session. Remember, a pastry is something that can be enjoyed throughout the day. You can have a pastry for breakfast. You can have a sweet pastry for lunch. You can have it as a snack. You can have it almost throughout the day and any time. And remember, the specifics of a pastry is the fact that it's a confectioner. So remember, different pastries were things like a phyllo dough, like a puff pastry dough, and those fine little intricate detailed sweets that we like to enjoy just throughout the day and certain times of the day. But now that dessert, that is something that's key and something that a lot of people like to mix up. A dessert is not necessarily something that's sweet. A dessert can be something that's like fruit. A dessert can be coffee. But the key point to a dessert is that it is at the end of a meal. So remember, a pastry is something that you can enjoy throughout the day, but a dessert is specifically geared towards the end of a meal. Whether it's the end of your lunch and you decide to have a dessert, or it's the end of your dinner and you decide to have a dessert. And it doesn't always have to be a confectioner. It doesn't have to always be something sweet. It can be, like I said, it can be fruit. It can be a tea at the end of your meal or a coffee at the end of your meal. So remember these key things that we talked about in your Academic Culinary Arts Academy. Remember the things that we covered throughout the last 6 weeks. Keep those things in mind as we move on and we go on into our next session that would happen to be the final recap and pull together of all these things, and then your chance to do a little competition with your friends and try to build some of those things that we did over the last 6 weeks and make them something special for yourself. So again, this is your head chef instructor, Dante West, signing off with you guys and saying, please remember to never stop learning and take yourself to the next level, because I want to see all of you guys end up being culinary monsters.